At a crowded transit garage, Lena Brooks, the only black woman mechanic there, was constantly looked down on by her coworkers. Then things took a darker turn when a worn-down, desperate biker walked in begging for urgent repairs so he could reach the hospital where his wife was fighting for her life. One by one, everyone turned their backs, everyone except Lena. That single compassionate choice got her fired on the spot. But what no one expected was that the biker wasn't just a stranger, he was a powerful billionaire. And from that moment on, everything changed. The fluorescent lights hummed like dying insects above the oil-stained concrete floor of Northline Transit and Auto. The kind of buzz that burrowed into your skull after 8 hours and never quite left. It was 7:30 on a Tuesday morning, still dark outside, and the shop smelled like burnt coffee, diesel exhaust, and the faint metallic tang of coolant that had been spilled and never fully cleaned. Lena Brooks crouched beneath a city bus, her shoulders wedged against cold steel, grease streaking her forearms. 27 years old, the only black woman in a shop of 43 mechanics. She had been here 4 years, and not a single day had passed without someone reminding her she didn't belong. "Yo, quota higher," a voice called from across the bay. Laughter followed, sharp and casual. "You done with that brake line yet, or you still figuring out which end is which?" She didn't answer. She had learned not to. Silence was cheaper than pride. Her wrench slipped. The bolt bit into her knuckle, splitting skin. Blood welled up, dark against grease. She hissed through her teeth, wiped it on her coveralls, and kept working. No one asked if she was okay. No one ever did. Howard Mills, the shop manager, stood near the dispatch desk with a clipboard, his belly pressing against a flannel shirt that hadn't been washed in a week. 58 years old. White, the kind of man who called everyone son even when they weren't. Especially when they weren't. "Brooks," he barked. "You better not be taking your sweet time under there. That bus rolls in 2 hours. It'll be ready," she said, her voice muffled by the undercarriage. "It better be. Last thing I need is some girl mechanic screwing up my schedule." Girl mechanic. Not mechanic. Girl mechanic. Like her gender was a disclaimer. She finished tightening the line, tested the connection, and rolled out from under the bus. Her knees ached. Her back screamed. She was too young to feel this old. Around her, the shop moved like a well-oiled machine that had no space for her. Men joked, passed tools, clapped each other on the back. She was a shadow among them. Noticed only when something went wrong, and something always went wrong. By noon, a customer stood at the counter, red-faced and shouting. A sedan had been brought in for an alignment. The wheel was still pulling left. Mills stormed onto the floor, his face twisted with rage. Who did the accord? Lena looked up from her bay. She hadn't touched it. That was Davis's job. Everyone knew it. But Mills's eyes landed on her. Brooks, front and center, now. Her stomach dropped. She walked over, hands still slick with oil, and stood before him. The customer glared at her. The other mechanics watched, silent and smirking. "You did this?" Mills asked. "No sir, that was Davis's." "Don't lie to me." "I'm not. I didn't work on that car." Mills turned to the customer, his voice dripping with false apology. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. This is what happens when you let people in who don't belong. We'll get someone competent on it right away." The words landed like stones. The customer's eyes raked over Lena with disgust. The mechanics turned away, shoulders shaking with silent laughter. Davis didn't say a word. Lena stood there, exposed and humiliated, her fists clenched so tight her nails drew blood from her palms. Mills waved her off. "Get out of my sight." She walked back to her bay, swallowing rage that tasted like copper. This was her life. This was every single day. And no one saw. No one cared. The afternoon dragged on in the same rhythm. Lena kept her head down, her hands busy, her thoughts locked away where no one could touch them. She had learned to build walls inside herself. Thick ones, walls that kept the insults out and the anger in. At 3 o'clock, she took her break in the small room behind the supply closet. It wasn't really a break room, just a space with a folding chair, a microwave that only worked half the time, and a coffee maker that produced something closer to tar than coffee. She sat alone, eating a peanut butter sandwich she'd made that morning, staring at the cracks in the wall. The door opened. It was Garrett, the broad-shouldered mechanic who'd been there longer than anyone except Mills. "Hey," he said. not quite meeting her eyes. "Hey, that thing with the accord. That was messed up." Lena didn't respond. "I mean, everyone knows Davis did that job." Mills he trailed off, shrugging. "Anyway, just wanted to say that." He left before she could reply. It was the closest thing to an apology she'd ever gotten from anyone in this place. And it wasn't even really an apology. Just an acknowledgement that injustice had occurred. As if acknowledging it was enough. As if seeing it absolved him of the responsibility to do anything about it. Lena finished her sandwich in silence and went back to work. The door to the shop swung open just after 1 in the afternoon, and the cold air that rushed in carried the smell of gasoline and desperation. A man stepped inside. Mid-40s, maybe 50. Leather jacket worn soft with age, scuffed boots, jeans torn at the knee. His hair was graying at the temples and his hands were rough, stained with old oil. He looked like he'd been on the road for days. Behind him, parked half on the curb, was a vintage motorcycle. A Norton Commando, if Lena remembered right. Beautiful once. Now sputtering and silent. The man's eyes swept the room, frantic, searching. "Please," he said, his voice breaking. "I need help. My bike died. My wife, she's at the hospital. Surgery. They said if I don't get there in the next hour." His voice cracked. He swallowed hard, trying again. "Please, I'll pay whatever it costs. I just need to get there." The shop fell silent. But it wasn't the silence of compassion. It was the silence of judgment. Kim, the receptionist, leaned back in her chair, chewing gum with slow, deliberate snaps. She looked him up and down like he'd tracked mud across her clean floor. "You got an appointment?" "No." Then you gotta wait." "I don't have time to wait. Everyone's got somewhere to be, honey." A customer sitting near the water cooler stood up, grabbed his coat, and muttered loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'm not staying here with that guy." Another customer, a woman in yoga pants, pulled her purse closer. "Is he safe?" The mechanics exchanged glances. One of them, a broad-shouldered man named Garrett, crossed his arms and shook his head. "Man, we don't need trouble. You should go." The man's face twisted, not with anger but with anguish. "I'm not trouble. I'm just, my wife is dying. Please, I'm begging you." Mills appeared from the back office, his expression already hardened. He took one look at the man, the jacket, the scuffed boots, the bike outside, and his lip curled. "We don't do walk-ins," Mills said flatly. "I'll pay double, triple, whatever it takes." I said no. The man's eyes glistened, his voice dropped to a whisper. "She's all I have." Mills stepped closer, his voice low and venomous. "You think you can walk in here looking like that and scare people into helping you? Get out. Before I call the cops." The words hung in the air like smoke. The man stood there, trembling. Not with rage, with despair. He looked around the room one last time, searching for a single face that might see him as human. But every eye turned away. Except one. Lena had been watching from her bay, her chest tightening with every word. She saw the panic in his eyes. The way his hands shook. The way he kept glancing at the door, as if every second wasted here was another second stolen from the woman he loved. She knew that look. She had worn it herself. 3 years ago, when her brother had been in a car accident and she'd raced to the hospital, covered in grease, still in her work clothes. The nurses had looked at her with suspicion. Security had followed her through the halls. Someone had asked if she was supposed to be there. As if grief had a dress code. As if love could be measured by appearance. She remembered the desperation, the feeling that time was slipping through her fingers like water, the terror that she might be too late, and she couldn't stand by and watch someone else go through it. Lena wiped her hands on her coveralls and stepped forward. Her voice cut through the silence, steady and clear. "I'll help." Every head in the shop turned toward her. Mills' face went red. "Brooks, stay out of this. He needs help. He's not a customer, he's a human being." Mills jabbed a finger at her. "You touch that bike, you're done." Lena looked at him, then at the man, then back at Mills, and she made her choice. "Then I'm done." She walked past Mills, past the staring mechanics, past the whispering customers, and out the door into the cold. The man followed, his breath hitching. "You don't have to do this." "Yeah," Lena said quietly. "I do." She knelt beside the Norton, her hands already moving. her mind locking onto the machine. She didn't know who this man was, didn't know his name, his story, his life. But she knew desperation when she saw it, and she wasn't going to let him face it alone. Inside the shop, Kim leaned toward Garrett and whispered loud enough for others to hear. "She's gonna regret that real quick." Garrett smirked. "Give it 5 minutes. Mills is gonna lose his mind." A customer near the door pulled out his phone and started recording. Another shook his head and muttered, "Unbelievable. They let anyone work here now." The woman in yoga pants wrinkled her nose. "I'm not coming back here. This place has gone downhill." Mills stood at the window, his arms crossed, watching Lena work. His jaw was clenched so tight a vein throbbed at his temple. Beside him Davis chuckled. "Man, she's really doing it. She's actually helping that guy." "Not for long," Mills said through gritted teeth. Outside, Lena's hands moved with practiced efficiency. She checked the ignition, tested the fuel line, traced the electrical connections. The man stood behind her, his breathing ragged, his eyes wet with tears he was too proud to let fall. "What's your name?" she asked without looking up. "Ethan," he said, his voice raw. "Ethan Caldwell. Ethan, I need you to breathe. I'm going to get you there." He let out a shaky laugh that was more sob than sound. "Why are you doing this?" "Because no one else would. But you don't even know me. I don't need to know you to see you're hurting." Ethan's throat closed up. He turned away, pressing a hand to his face, shoulders shaking. No one had looked at him like that in years, like he was a person, like his pain mattered. In his world, the world of boardrooms and quarterly reports and shareholders, vulnerability was weakness. Emotion was liability. You didn't show pain, you didn't ask for help. And when you did, when you were stripped of your armor, and standing in a shop with grease on your hands and desperation in your voice, people looked right through you. Until now, Lena found the problem, a loose connection in the starter relay. Simple fix. She tightened it, tested it, and the engine coughed to life. "There," she said, standing and wiping her hands. "You're good to go." Ethan stared at the bike, then at her, his eyes wide with disbelief. "I don't. How can I?" "You can go," Lena said firmly. "That's how you can thank me. Go be with your wife." Before he could respond, the shop door burst open and Mills stormed out, his face purple with rage. The air outside was sharp and bitter, the kind of cold that bit through thin coveralls and settled in your bones. Lena's breath came out in white clouds as she stood beside the Norton, her hands still streaked with grease, her heart pounding in her chest. Mills stormed across the lot, his boots slapping against the pavement. "Brooks, get your ass back in here." Now, Lena didn't move. She stood her ground, her jaw set, her eyes steady. "Did you hear me?" Mills roared. "You're done. You're fired." The words echoed across the parking lot. Customers inside the shop pressed against the windows to watch. Mechanics gathered near the door, whispering, some smirking, some uncomfortable. Lena took a breath. Just for a second, she let herself feel the weight of it. 4 years of swallowing insults, of proving herself over and over, of fighting for scraps of respect that never came. And now it was over. She looked up at Mills, her eyes steady and unflinching. "I heard you, then get away from that bike, and get out of here." Nose's face went from purple to nearly black. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath, and see the burst blood vessels in his cheeks. "You think you're special. You think standing up for this bum makes you a hero. It makes you a fool." Ethan flinched at the word, his hands curling into fists. Mills jabbed a finger at Lena's chest. "You're nothing, Brooks. You're a quota hire. A diversity check. The only reason you got this job was to make us look good, and you just threw it all away for some nobody in a leather jacket who probably can't even pay his bills." The mechanics behind him shifted uncomfortably. A few looked away, but no one spoke up. Lena felt the words land, felt them dig in like hooks. But she didn't flinch. She stood tall, her shoulders back, her voice calm and clear. "I'm not nothing," she said, her voice low but sharp as glass. "I've earned every bolt I've turned, every engine I've fixed, every hour I've put in. And I don't need your permission to be a decent human being." Mills sneered. "You're done in this industry. I'll make sure of it. You think anyone's gonna hire you after I'm through? You're black, you're a woman. And now you're a troublemaker. You'll be lucky to get a job pumping gas." The words hung in the air, ugly and raw. Lena felt them settle on her skin like ash, but she didn't break. "I can lose a job," she said quietly. "I won't lose who I am." Mills spat on the ground near her feet. "Your choice. Don't come crawling back when you're broke and desperate." He turned and stormed back toward the shop, shouting over his shoulder, "And if I see you on this property again, I'm calling the cops." The door slammed shut behind him with a sound like a gunshot. Lena stood there, the weight of what she'd just done, pressing down on her chest like a stone. She had no job, no prospects, no safety net, but she had her conscience, and somehow that felt like enough. Ethan's voice broke through the silence, thick with guilt and something close to awe. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You didn't have to do that." "Stop," Lena said, her voice firm. "You needed help, that's all that mattered. But you lost your job because of me. I lost my job because I chose to help you. There's a difference." She looked at him, her eyes soft but clear. "And I'd make the same choice again." Ethan stared at her, his throat working, his eyes glassy. "I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. Just go, be with your wife. Don't waste another second." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a wad of cash, maybe $300 or $400, and tried to press it into her hand. "Please, take it, it's all I have on me, but I can get more. I can." She pushed his hand away gently. "I didn't do this for money." "Then what do I owe you?" She looked at him for a long moment. "You don't owe me anything, just get to her. That's all I want." Ethan's face crumpled. He pressed the back of his hand to his mouth, trying to hold it together. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you. I won't forget this, I won't forget you." He climbed onto the bike, kicked it into gear, and tore down the street, the roar of the engine fading into the distance. Lena stood alone in the cold, her breath misting in the air, her hands trembling now that the adrenaline was wearing off. She looked back at the shop. Through the window, she could see the mechanics returning to their bays, the customers settling back into their seats. Life moving on, as if nothing had happened, as if she had never been there at all. But for the first time in 4 years, she didn't feel small, she felt human. And that somehow was worth everything. She turned and started walking. Not toward home. Not yet, she just needed to walk, to move. To feel the ground beneath her feet, and the cold air on her face, and the reality of what she'd just done. She walked for blocks, past shops and restaurants. Past people hurrying home from work. Past a playground, where children swung in the fading light, and with each step, the weight lifted just a little. Not the fear, not the uncertainty, but the shame. For 4 years, she had carried shame like a second skin. Shame that she wasn't good enough. Shame that she didn't belong. Shame that she had to work twice as hard for half the respect. But today, she had nothing to be ashamed of. Today, she had been exactly who she wanted to be. And no one could take that from her. Lena walked home that evening, with her hands shoved deep in her pockets, her head down against the wind. The city moved around her, indifferent and loud, a river of people who didn't know her name, and wouldn't care if they did. The walk took 45 minutes, she couldn't afford the bus anymore. Not until she figured out what came next. Her feet ached by the time she reached her building. A sagging 4-story walk-up in a neighborhood that smelled like mildew, fried food and exhaust fumes. The stairwell was dark, one of the lights had burned out weeks ago, and no one had bothered to replace it. She climbed slowly, her legs heavy, her mind numb. Inside her apartment, the air was cold, the heat had been spotty all winter, and tonight it wasn't working at all. She could see her breath, the space was small. A couch with sagging cushions, and a tear in the armrest she'd covered with duct tape. A kitchen table held up by a phone book wedged under one leg. A single window, that looked out onto a brick wall. On the kitchen counter, bills were stacked in a precarious pile. She'd been putting off opening them, but she couldn't avoid them forever. She dropped her bag by the door, and sank onto the couch, her body folding in on itself. For the first time since that morning, she let herself feel the full weight of what had happened. She was unemployed. In the middle of winter, with rent due in 2 weeks, her phone buzzed, a text from her mother. "How was work, baby?" Lena stared at the screen, her chest tight, Her mother worked nights at a nursing home on the south side, her back bent from years of lifting patients twice her size, patients who didn't remember her name, patients who sometimes called her names she tried not to repeat. Her mother sent money when she could. Lena sent money back when she could. It was never enough. It was never going to be enough. She typed a reply, her fingers slow and deliberate. Fine. Just tired. She couldn't tell her. Not yet, not when her mother was already carrying so much. Lena set the phone down and pulled the stack of bills toward her. She opened the first one. Electric, past due, $53. The second one. Phone, overdue, $68. The third one made her stomach drop. It was an eviction notice. 30 days to vacate. The landlord had underlined the date in red ink, as if she might miss it otherwise. 30 days, where would she go? She didn't have family in Chicago. Her mother lived 2 hours away in a studio apartment that barely fit one person. She didn't have friends with extra rooms. Didn't have savings. She had nothing. Lena folded the notice and set it aside, her hands shaking. She thought about Ethan. Wondered if he'd made it to the hospital in time. Wondered if his wife was okay. Wondered if in a week or a month, he'd even remember her name. She thought about Mills, the way he'd looked at her with such contempt, the way he'd said she was nothing, the way he'd promised to make sure she never worked again. And then she thought about the choice she'd made. The line she'd crossed, the bridge she'd burned. Even now, sitting in her freezing apartment, with an eviction notice on the counter, and no idea what came next, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. Because some things were worth more than a paycheck. Some things were worth more than safety. She had looked a man in the eye, and seen his humanity when everyone else saw a threat. She had chosen to act when everyone else chose to turn away. And if the price for that choice was steep, then so be it. She would find another job. She would figure out the rent. She would survive. Because that's what she did. She pulled out her laptop, old slow, the screen cracked in one corner, and opened a job search site. She scrolled through listings. Fast food. Retail. Warehouse work. Overnight stocking. Delivery driver. Dog walker. House cleaner. Anything. She'd take anything. She applied to 17 jobs that night. Filled out forms until her eyes burned and her fingers cramped. Most of them would never respond. She knew that. But she had to try. Because giving up wasn't an option. Not yet. Not ever. At midnight, she finally closed the laptop and lay down on the couch, too tired to move to the bedroom. She pulled a thin blanket over herself and stared at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come. Her mind kept replaying the day. Mills' face. Ethan's gratitude. The sound of the door slamming. The looks from the other mechanics. She thought about her father. He'd been a mechanic too. Worked at a shop on the west side, for 20 years before a heart attack took him. When Lena was 15, he'd taught her everything. How to read an engine. How to feel what was wrong before you saw it. How to take pride in work well done. He'd also taught her something else. Don't let them make you small. He'd said once, when she was 12 and crying because a boy at school had told her girls couldn't be mechanics. The world's gonna try. Every day. But you don't have to let them win. She hadn't understood it then. She understood it now. Lena closed her eyes and let herself cry. Not from despair. Not from exhaustion. From the bone-deep weariness of fighting a battle that never seemed to end. But even as the tears came, she felt something else beneath them. Resolve. She had made her choice. And she would live with it. No matter what came next. Meanwhile, across the city, Ethan Caldwell burst through the doors of Chicago General Hospital, his chest heaving, his hands still smelling of gasoline and grease. He ran to the reception desk, nearly slamming into it. Sarah Caldwell. Surgery. Where is she? The nurse behind the desk looked up, startled by his intensity. 4th floor, ICU. But sir, visiting hours, I'm her husband. The nurse hesitated, then nodded. 4th floor. Take the elevator. Ethan didn't wait. He bolted toward the elevator, jabbing the button over and over as if that would make it come faster. When the doors finally opened, he threw himself inside and punched the button for the 4th floor. The ride felt endless. each second stretched thin, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. What if he was too late? What if she'd already? The doors opened. He stumbled into the hallway and saw a doctor standing outside one of the rooms, pulling off latex gloves. Ethan ran toward him, his voice breaking. "Sarah Caldwell. Is she?" The doctor's face was unreadable. "Tired. Worn. You're her husband." "Yes, please. Is she?" "She made it through surgery." Ethan's knees buckled. He grabbed the wall for support, his vision swimming. "But it was close," the doctor continued. "Very close. Another 20 minutes, and we would have lost her. The internal bleeding was severe. We had to remove her spleen and repair significant damage to her liver. She's stable now, but the next 48 hours are critical." "Can I see her?" Ethan interrupted, his voice barely above a whisper. The doctor hesitated. "She's still under anesthesia, but you can sit with her." Ethan nodded, unable to speak. The doctor gestured toward the room, and Ethan pushed through the door on shaking legs. Inside, the air smelled like antiseptic and something metallic he didn't want to name. Machines beeped softly, rhythmically. An IV drip hung beside the bed, tubes snaking down to her arm, and there she was. Sarah, pale. So pale, her skin looked almost translucent, bruised around the eyes and jawline from where she'd hit the pavement when she collapsed. Her hair, usually so carefully styled, was matted and pushed back from her face. Oxygen tubes in her nose. A blood pressure cuff around her arm that inflated and deflated with mechanical regularity, but she was breathing. Ethan crossed the room in 3 strides and sank into the chair beside her bed. He took her hand, cold, limp, and pressed it to his forehead. Tears streamed down his face, hot and unchecked. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry, I almost didn't make it." His voice broke on the last word, and he sat there, holding her hand, sobbing quietly in the sterile silence of the ICU. He thought about the shop. The way they'd looked at him. The way they'd turned him away. The receptionist with her cold eyes and colder voice. The mechanics who'd crossed their arms and shaken their heads. The manager who'd told him to leave. The customers who'd pulled away like he was contagious. He thought about how invisible he'd felt in that moment. How stripped of his identity. How reduced to nothing more than his appearance. Ethan Caldwell was not a man accustomed to being invisible. He was the founder and CEO of Caldwell Industries, one of the largest privately held logistics and manufacturing companies in the Midwest, worth north of $3 billion, a name that opened doors, commanded rooms, moved mountains. But none of that had mattered in that shop. Because they hadn't seen Ethan Caldwell, CEO. They'd seen a man in a leather jacket with grease on his hands, and they judged him accordingly. And then he thought about her. Lena. The woman who'd stepped forward when everyone else stepped back. The woman who'd knelt in the cold and fixed his bike without asking for anything in return. The woman who'd lost her job because she'd chosen to see him as human. He owed her everything. But more than that, he owed her justice. Because while he sat here holding his wife's hand, Lena was out there somewhere, alone, unemployed, paying the price for doing the right thing. And the people who had turned him away, who had humiliated her, fired her, cast her out, they were still there. Still in power. Still treating people like her as disposable. That, Ethan decided, was going to change. He didn't know how yet, but he would figure it out. Because some debts couldn't be paid with money. They could only be paid with action. He sat with Sarah through the night, watching her breathe, listening to the steady beep of the heart monitor. And as the hours passed, a plan began to form in his mind. Not revenge. Something better. Justice. He pulled out his phone and sent a text to his assistant. "I need everything you can find on Northline Transit and Auto. Management. Ownership structure. Complaint history. Everything. And I need it by tomorrow morning." The response came back immediately. "Understood. I'll have it on your desk by 8 a.m. Ethan set the phone down and looked at his wife, still sleeping, still safe, and he made a promise. The woman who saved him wouldn't be forgotten, and the people who turned him away were going to learn what it meant to judge too quickly. Lena woke the next morning to the sound of her phone ringing. She groaned, rolled over, and squinted at the screen through eyes still heavy with sleep. Unknown number. She let it ring. Probably a bill collector. Or a scam. Or both. It rang again 30 seconds later. She ignored it again. When it rang a third time she answered, her voice rough. What? A man's voice, calm and professional. Is this Lena Brooks? Who's asking? My name is Marcus Webb. I'm calling on behalf of Ethan Caldwell. Lena sat up, her heart suddenly pounding. Is he okay? Is his wife? She's recovering. The surgery went well. Thanks to you, Mr. Caldwell made it to the hospital in time. Lena let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That's good. I'm glad. Mr. Caldwell would like to meet with you. Today if possible. Why? He'd prefer to explain in person. Lena frowned, her suspicion rising. I don't need thanks. I don't need anything from him. I understand, but he's insistent. And Miss Brooks, Marcus paused. He wants to talk to you about North Line Transit and Auto. Lena's chest tightened. What about it? He'd rather discuss that face to face. There was something in the man's voice, not pressure, not manipulation, but a quiet insistence that felt almost respectful, that made her pause. Where? She asked finally. I'll text you the address. Would 11 o'clock work? Lena glanced at the clock. It was 9:30. Yeah, fine. Thank you, Miss Brooks, we'll see you then. He hung up before she could change her mind. Lena sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her phone, her mind racing. What did Ethan want? Why did he want to talk about the shop? Part of her wanted to ignore it, to let it go. She'd made her choice, paid her price, and that was the end of it. But another part of her, the part that had spent 4 years swallowing injustice, wanted to know what he had to say. She showered, dressed in the cleanest clothes she had, a pair of dark jeans and a sweater that wasn't too worn, and took the bus downtown. The address Marcus had sent led her to a gleaming high-rise in the heart of Chicago's business district, the kind of building that made her feel small just looking at it. She stood outside for a full minute, staring up at the glass and steel, before finally forcing herself through the revolving door. The lobby was all marble and mirrors. A security guard sat behind a desk, looking bored. Help you? He asked. I'm here to see Ethan Caldwell. He checked his computer. Name? Lena Brooks. He nodded and handed her a visitor badge. 32nd floor. Elevators are on your left. Lena clipped the badge to her sweater and headed for the elevators, feeling more out of place with every step. This wasn't her world. These were the kind of buildings people like her only entered through the service entrance, carrying mops and cleaning supplies. But the doorman had waved her through. The guard had given her a badge. The elevator carried her smoothly upward without question. Maybe she belonged here after all. Or maybe she was just being allowed in temporarily, like a guest who would be asked to leave as soon as the meeting was over. The elevator opened onto a reception area that smelled like leather and expensive coffee. Everything was clean, polished, perfect. A woman in a tailored suit greeted her with a polite smile. Miss Brooks. This way, please. Lena followed her down a hallway lined with art that probably cost more than her entire year's rent. Abstract paintings that meant nothing to her. Sculptures that looked like twisted metal. They stopped at a small conference room. Not the grand boardroom she'd expected, but an intimate space with a table, 4 chairs, and a window that overlooked the gray sprawl of the city. Ethan Caldwell stood at the window, his back to her. He was dressed differently now. Button-down shirt, dark slacks, polished shoes. But she recognized the set of his shoulders. The way he held himself, like someone carrying weight. Thank you for coming, he said without turning around. I wasn't sure I should. He turned, and she saw his face clearly for the first time in daylight. Older than she'd thought, lines around his eyes and mouth that spoke of years spent worrying. But his eyes were clear, steady, kind. You always have a choice, he said quietly. You taught me that. Lena shifted uncomfortably. How's your wife? Awake. Talking. The doctors say she'll make a full recovery. His voice wavered slightly. Because of you. I just fixed a bike. You did more than that. He gestured to the chair. Please. Sit. She hesitated then sat. He remained standing, his hands in his pockets, his expression thoughtful. I want to help you, he said. I don't need help. You lost your job because of me. I lost my job because I made a choice. That's not on you. Ethan studied her for a long moment, his head tilted slightly. Most people would be angry, bitter, looking for someone to blame. I'm not most people. No, he said softly. You're not. He pulled a folder from the table and set it in front of her, but he didn't open it. Instead, he sat down across from her, his expression serious. Can I tell you something? He asked. Sure. Yesterday when I walked into that shop, I was terrified. Not because of the bike, because of Sarah, because I knew if I didn't get to her in time, I'd lose her. And that fear, it made me feel helpless in a way I haven't felt since I was a kid. He paused, his throat working. And then I walked into that shop, and everyone looked at me like I was a threat, like I was dangerous, like I didn't deserve help. And I realized something. What? That's how you feel every day. Lena's breath caught. Not the fear of losing someone, Ethan continued, but the feeling of being judged before you even open your mouth, of being seen as less than, of having to prove you deserve basic human decency. He leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. I had one bad day. You've had 4 years of them. And that's not right. Lena's throat tightened. No one had ever said it like that before. No one had ever named it so clearly. I had someone look into North Line Transit and Auto, Ethan said. Not because I wanted to pry into your life, but because something about that place felt wrong. The way they treated me. The way they treated you. I needed to know if it was just one bad day or something deeper. He opened the folder and slid it toward her. 47 complaints filed over the last 3 years. Racial discrimination. Sexual harassment. Hostile work environment. All buried. All dismissed. All swept under the rug by management and HR. Lena stared at the documents. Her own complaints were there. 6 of them. Each one dismissed with a variation of the same excuse. Unable to substantiate. No action taken. I know, she said quietly. You filed 6 of them yourself. She looked up at him, her jaw tight. And they did nothing. Every single time. I know. And that's why I want to do something about it. Lena leaned back in her chair, her arms crossed. Like what? I don't know yet, he admitted. But I have resources, connections, and I'm willing to use them. If you'll let me. Why? Lena asked, her voice sharp. What do you get out of this? Ethan blinked, clearly caught off guard. Nothing. Nobody does something for nothing. Especially not people like you. People like me. Rich people, powerful people, people who can afford offices on the 32nd floor. She gestured around the room. You want to help me, fine. But I need to know why. Because if this is about you feeling guilty, or you trying to buy yourself some kind of redemption, I'm not interested. Ethan was silent for a long moment. Then he sat back, his expression thoughtful. Fair enough, he said. The truth is, I don't know if I can fix what's broken at that shop. I don't even know if I should try. Systems like that, they're bigger than one person. Bigger than one intervention. Then why are we here? Because yesterday you saved my wife's life, and you paid a price for it. And that doesn't sit well with me. So this is about your conscience. Maybe, he admitted. Or maybe it's because you're the only person I've met in a long time who actually gave a damn about someone other than themselves. And I want to make sure that means something. Lena studied him, searching his face for signs of deception or manipulation. But all she saw was sincerity and exhaustion. This man was tired. Not physically, but in the way that came from carrying too much for too long. She recognized it because she carried it too. I'll think about it, she said finally, standing. Ethan stood as well. That's all I'm asking. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Your wife. What's her name? Sarah. Tell her I'm glad she's okay. I will. And Lena, he hesitated. Thank you. For everything. She nodded and left without another word. Ethan stood alone in the conference room, staring at the door she'd walked through. He had expected gratitude. Maybe even desperation. But what he'd gotten was skepticism. Worriness. A refusal to be rescued. And somehow that made him respect her even more. Because Lena Brooks wasn't looking for a savior. She was looking for justice. And if he was going to help her, he'd have to earn it. 2 weeks passed. Lena didn't hear from Ethan Caldwell again. Didn't hear from anyone at Northline either. Not that she'd expected to. She had made her choice and accepted the consequences. She worked 3 part-time jobs now. Mornings at a coffee shop on the north side, pulling espresso shots and wiping down tables for $9 an hour, plus tips that barely added up to $50 a week. Afternoons doing delivery runs for a food app, biking through the cold until her legs burned and her lungs ached, making maybe $12 an hour if she was lucky. Nights stocking shelves at a 24-hour grocery store, alone in the fluorescent hum with cases of canned goods and her own exhausted thoughts, for $11 an hour. She worked 60 hours a week and barely made enough to cover rent. She slept 4 hours a night if she was lucky. She ate instant ramen and day-old bread she bought marked down from the grocery store. She wore the same 3 outfits on rotation because she couldn't afford to do laundry more than once every 2 weeks. She avoided her landlord and counted the days until the eviction notice became real. 21 days left. Then 20. Then 19. She had started looking at shelters, just in case. Then on a Thursday afternoon her phone rang while she was delivering pad thai to an office building downtown. Marcus Webb again. Miss Brooks, I need you to come to Northline Transit and Auto, today, 2 o'clock. Why? Mr. Caldwell will explain. I don't work there anymore. I'm not even sure I should go back there. I know, but this is important. Please, it won't take long. Lena looked at her phone, at the list of pending deliveries. She'd lose money if she stopped now, maybe $30 or $40. But something in Marcus's voice made her agree. Fine. 2 o'clock. Thank you, Miss Brooks. At 2 o'clock, Lena stood outside Northline Transit and Auto, her chest tight, her hands clenched in her pockets. She hadn't been back since the day Mills fired her. Hadn't wanted to see the place again. Hadn't wanted to face the memories. But here she was. A black sedan pulled up to the curb, sleek and expensive. Ethan stepped out, followed by Marcus Webb and another man she didn't recognize. Older gray-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her rent. Ethan saw her and nodded. Thank you for coming. What's this about? You'll see. They walked inside together. The shop went quiet. Mechanics froze mid-task. Customers looked up from their phones. Kim, the receptionist, stopped mid-gum snap, her eyes widening. Mills appeared from the back office, his face already twisting with confusion and then contempt. What the hell is this? Ethan stepped forward, his expression calm but his eyes hard. Howard Mills. My name is Ethan Caldwell. We met 2 weeks ago. Mills squinted, recognition dawning slowly. Yeah, the biker. So what? You come back to thank us for nothing. We told you to leave. I'm not here to thank you. I'm here to deliver a message. Mills crossed his arms, his jaw set. I don't know who you think you are, but I'm a consultant. Ethan said calmly. Hired by Transit Solutions Group, the parent company that owns this facility, to evaluate operations across all their contracted locations, including this one. Mills's face paled slightly. Nobody told me about any evaluation. That was intentional. Ethan gestured to the man with the briefcase. This is Richard Landon, lead auditor for Transit Solutions Group. He's been conducting a comprehensive review of this facility for the past 10 days. Financial records, complaint logs, employee interviews, customer feedback, everything. Richard stepped forward and set his briefcase on the counter. He pulled out a thick folder and opened it with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this many times before. 47 documented complaints over 3 years, Richard said, his voice flat and professional. Racial discrimination, gender-based harassment, hostile work environment. 3 lawsuits settled quietly out of court for a combined total of $460,000. A pattern of misconduct, so consistent and so well documented that it constitutes systemic failure of management. Those are confidential. Mills sputtered, his face going from pale to red. Not anymore, Ethan said. As of this morning, the board has reviewed the findings. They've made their decision. Mills's face went from red to purple. You can't just waltz in here and I'm not waltzing. Ethan interrupted, his voice hardening. I'm delivering their decision. Effective immediately, you are being removed from your position as shop manager. The company is implementing new management, new policies and full oversight of operations. You have 30 minutes to clear out your office and leave the premises. The shop erupted. Mechanics muttered to each other. Customers whispered. Kim dropped her gum on the floor. Mills's hands balled into fists. This is bullshit. I've been here 15 years. You can't do this to me. It's already done. I'll sue. I'll take this company for everything. You'll lose. Richard closed the folder with a sharp snap. We have documentation of every violation, every complaint you buried, every employee you retaliated against, every instance of discriminatory behavior. If you pursue legal action, we will bury you in court, and given your conduct, there's a strong possibility of criminal charges for witness tampering and retaliation. Mills looked around the room, desperate, searching for support, but every face looked away. Even Garrett, his most loyal mechanic, suddenly found the floor fascinating. He was alone. Mills grabbed his jacket from the hook near his office, his hands shaking with rage. This isn't over, he hissed, his voice low and venomous. You think you've won. You haven't. I'll make sure of it. All of you will regret this. No, Ethan said quietly, stepping closer. You will, because unlike you, these people are going to move forward. They're going to build something better, and you're going to be exactly where you belong, on the outside, forgotten. Mills's face twisted with fury. For a moment, Lena thought he might actually throw a punch, but instead he spat on the ground near Ethan's feet and stormed toward the door. And Mills, Ethan called after him. Mills stopped but didn't turn around. If I hear that you've contacted anyone from this shop, if you post anything online, if you make any attempt to interfere with operations here, I will make it my personal mission to ensure you never work in this industry again. Are we clear? Mills didn't answer. He just shoved through the door, slamming it so hard the glass rattled in its frame. For a long moment, the shop was silent. Then Ethan turned to face the room, his expression serious. I know change is uncomfortable, he said, his voice carrying across the floor. But this place has been operating on fear and prejudice for too long. That ends today. New management will be announced by the end of the week. New policies will be implemented immediately. And anyone who can't treat their coworkers with basic dignity and respect should start looking for work elsewhere. He paused, letting the words sink in. This is not about political correctness. This is about professionalism. About treating people like human beings. About building a workplace where everyone can do their job without fear of harassment or discrimination. His eyes swept the room. If that's a problem for you, the door is right there. No one moved. Ethan nodded. Good. Then let's get back to work. He turned to Lena. Miss Brooks, can I speak with you outside? Lena followed him out onto the sidewalk, her heart pounding. Ethan turned to her, his expression softening. I know this doesn't undo what happened to you, and I know you didn't ask for any of this, but I needed you to see it. I needed you to know that what you did, standing up for me, choosing compassion over fear, it mattered. And Mills doesn't get to walk away from what he did. Lena's throat was tight. She wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. What happens now? She finally managed. Now we see if this place can actually change. He paused. And I'd like you to be part of that. Not as a mechanic, as a consultant. Someone who can work with the new management to make sure these changes stick. Someone who knows what it's like to be on the receiving end of the old system. Lena stared at him. Why me? Because you're the only person in that building who had the courage to stand up. And that's the kind of person we need leading change. Not someone from corporate, who'll implement policies and disappear. Someone who actually cares. She looked back at the shop, at the faces pressed against the windows, at the building that had tried to break her. "I need to think about it," she said. "Fair enough." Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. "Take all the time you need. When you're ready, call me." Lena took the card, her fingers brushing against the embossed lettering. "Ethan Caldwell, Chief Executive Officer, Caldwell Industries." She looked up at him, her eyes wide. Yeah." He gave her a tired smile. "I should have told you before, but I wanted you to see me the way you saw me that day, as just a person who needed help." Lena didn't know what to say. "The offer stands," Ethan said. "No pressure, no strings, just an opportunity to help build something better." He walked back to the car, leaving Lena standing on the sidewalk, the business card heavy in her hand, and for the first time in 2 weeks, she felt something she hadn't felt since that day in the cold. Hope. Howard Mills didn't disappear quietly. He sat in a bar 3 blocks from Northline, nursing his 4th whiskey of the afternoon, his hands shaking with rage. 15 years. 15 years of keeping that shop running, of making it profitable, of holding it together through strikes and shortages and incompetent corporate interference. And they threw him out, like garbage, because of some rich asshole in a leather jacket and a girl who didn't know her place. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. He still had friends, people who owed him favors, people who understood that the world worked a certain way, and when someone tried to flip that order upside down, you pushed back, hard. He made a call. "Yeah, it's me. I need a favor." The voice on the other end was gravelly, skeptical. "Mills, heard you got canned. What do you want?" "There's a shop on the south side. Northline Transit. They just brought in new management, corporate types who don't know shit about how things really work. And there's a girl there, a mechanic, who thinks she's some kind of hero. So I want you to make things difficult for them. Reviews, complaints, stories in the press. Make it look like the place is falling apart. Make it look like she's the problem. That's gonna cost you. I don't care. Do it. How much you got?" Mills looked at his bank balance. $12,000. His severance. Money he'd been planning to use, to hold him over until he found another job. $10,000, he said. "Half now, half when it's done." There was a pause. "All right. Give me a week." Mills hung up and drained his glass. If they wanted to throw him away, fine, but he'd make damn sure they regretted it. He'd burn that place to the ground if he had to. And he'd start with Lena Brooks. Over the next 2 weeks, strange things began to happen at Northline Transit and Auto. It started with the online reviews. Anonymous accounts flooded every review site. Google, Yelp, Facebook, even obscure automotive forums, all posting 1-star ratings within hours of each other. "Got my car back worse than when I brought it in. New management is a complete joke. They don't know what they're doing. They fired all their experienced mechanics and replaced them with diversity hires who can't tell a wrench from a screwdriver. Standards are completely gone. Would give 0 stars if I could. My brakes failed 3 days after they fixed them. Almost got into a serious accident. Do not take your car here unless you want to die. This place used to be good. Now it's run by politically correct idiots who care more about optics than actual quality. Avoid at all costs." The reviews came in waves. 10 in one day, 15 the next, 20 the day after that. Then came the phone calls. Customers calling to cancel appointments, demanding refunds for work that had supposedly been botched weeks or even months earlier, threatening lawsuits over problems that didn't exist or couldn't be verified. Patricia Chen, the new manager brought in from the parent company's Detroit location, spent her days fielding complaints she couldn't verify and trying to calm customers who wouldn't listen. "I'm telling you, we have no record of your vehicle ever being serviced here," she said, into the phone, her voice strained with exhaustion. "Can you provide a receipt? Any documentation? Your name isn't in our system." The caller hung up. Patricia set the phone down and rubbed her temples. This was the 12th call today, all of them following the same pattern, all of them claiming shoddy work or discriminatory treatment, none of them able to provide proof. It wasn't a coincidence. Then the stories hit the local news. North Line Transit under fire. After controversial management shakeup, former employees allege retaliation and unsafe practices at Southside Auto Shop. Discrimination scandal or witch hunt. Firing of longtime manager divides community. Is diversity push at auto shop putting customers at risk? The articles were carefully worded, just vague enough to avoid outright libel, but the implication was clear. The new management was incompetent, the changes were reckless, the shop was dangerous, and buried in each article mentioned almost casually was Lena Brooks, the mechanic at the center of the controversy, the woman who had allegedly caused all of this. Mills' fingerprints were all over it, but proving it was another matter entirely. Revenue dropped 20% in the first week, 30% in the second. Mechanics started updating their resumes, worried the shop would close. Suppliers delayed shipments, concerned they wouldn't get paid. The shop was bleeding out, and somewhere in a bar 3 blocks away Howard Mills was watching the news coverage on his phone and smiling. Lena sat in her apartment one night scrolling through the articles on her phone, her jaw clenched so tight it ached. She hadn't taken the consulting job, hadn't gone back to the shop. She'd told Ethan she needed time to think, but she'd been following the news, and she knew exactly what was happening. Mills was burning it down, and he was using her as kindling. Every article mentioned her name, every review referenced her. The narrative had been set. Lena Brooks, the unqualified diversity hire who had destroyed a perfectly good shop because she couldn't handle a little criticism. It was a lie, but lies didn't need to be true to be effective. They just needed to be repeated often enough. Her phone rang. It was Patricia. Lena, I need your help. I don't work there. I know, but this what's happening, it's not real. These complaints, these reviews, they're coordinated. Someone's orchestrating a smear campaign, and I think you know who. Lena was silent. Please, Patricia said, and there was real desperation in her voice. I'm trying to hold this place together, but I can't do it alone. If we don't stop this, North Line is going to shut down. The parent company is already talking about cutting their losses. And everyone who works here, good people, people with families, people who are just trying to make a living, they're going to lose their jobs. Lena closed her eyes, pressing her thumb and forefinger against the bridge of her nose. What do you want me to do? She asked quietly. I want you to help me fight back. I want you to help me prove this is a hit job, and I want you to come back, not as a consultant, as part of the team, because people need to see that you're still here, that you're not afraid. That Mills didn't win. Lena thought about it, thought about the mechanics who had stood by while she was humiliated, thought about the customers who had judged her, thought about the system that had chewed her up and spit her out. But she also thought about the new hires Patricia had brought in. Young people, women, people of color, people who were just trying to get a foothold in an industry that didn't want them. People like her. I'll think about it, Lena said. Please don't take too long. We're running out of time. Patricia hung up. Lena set her phone down and stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. She knew what Mills was doing. She knew how dangerous it was. She knew that going back to North Line would make her a target all over again, but she also knew something else. If she didn't fight back, Mills would win, not just against her, against everyone like her, and she couldn't let that happen. Meanwhile, across the city, Ethan sat in his office, staring at the same articles on his computer screen, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. Marcus stood beside him, tablet in hand, his expression grim. It's Mills, has to be. The pattern is too consistent. Fake accounts, coordinated reviews, planted stories, classic smear campaign. Can we prove it? We're working on it. I've got a team tracing the IP addresses of the fake accounts, following the money trail on some of the suspicious activity, but he's smart. Uses VPNs, burner phones, intermediaries. It's going to take time. We don't have time. Ethan stood and paced to the window, looking out over the city. Every day this goes on, the damage gets worse. Patricia's drowning. The new hires are bailing. The parent company is losing faith. And Lena, he stopped himself. Marcus raised an eyebrow. What about her? She lost everything for this. She did the right thing, and now she's watching everything fall apart. Again, if we don't stop Mills, he wins. And people like Lena learn that standing up isn't worth it. So what do you want to do? Ethan turned from the window, his expression hard. I want to expose him, publicly, completely. I want everyone to see exactly what he's doing and why. I want to make it impossible for him to hide. That could backfire, Marcus warned. Make you look vindictive, like you're settling a personal score. The media could spin it as a billionaire, using his power to crush a working-class guy who stood up to him. I don't care. Ethan's voice was cold. He's not a working-class hero. He's a bully who's destroying people's livelihoods to protect his ego. He's weaponizing prejudice and fear. That ends now. Marcus was silent for a moment, studying his boss's face. Then he nodded slowly. Okay, but if we're going to do this, we need to do it right. We need evidence. Real undeniable evidence. The kind that can't be disputed or spun. Then find it. I'm on it. Ethan turned back to the window, staring out at the city lights beginning to flicker on as dusk settled over Chicago. Mills thought he could hide in the shadows, but Ethan was about to drag him into the light. And this time, there would be nowhere to run. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. This is Caldwell. I need to hire a crisis management team. The best you have, and I need them yesterday. Because if he was going to do this, he was going to do it right. He was going to make sure the truth came out, all of it. Ethan didn't call a press conference. He did something smarter. He went directly to the people. On a cold Tuesday morning, a video appeared simultaneously on every major social media platform. Not promoted, not sponsored, just uploaded at the exact same moment to Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. The algorithm god smiled. Within minutes it was being shared, retweeted, reposted. The video showed Ethan Caldwell standing in front of Northline Transit and Auto, the shop visible behind him in the gray morning light. He was dressed simply jeans, a dark jacket, no tie. He looked tired, human, real. My name is Ethan Caldwell, he began, his voice steady and clear. 3 weeks ago I walked into this shop as a stranger in desperate need of help. My motorcycle had broken down on my way to the hospital. My wife was in emergency surgery. I had less than an hour to get there. He paused, his expression somber. I was turned away, not because I couldn't pay, not because they were too busy, but because of how I looked, because I was wearing a leather jacket and riding an old bike, because people judged me before I even opened my mouth. They saw the clothes, the bike, the weathered hands, and they decided I was dangerous, a threat, someone to be feared rather than helped. The camera stayed on his face. No cuts, no edits, no music, just him, speaking directly to whoever was watching. One person helped me, he continued. Lena Brooks, a mechanic who'd been working at this shop for 4 years. She saw me, not the jacket, not the bike, me, a man begging to get to his wife. She fixed my bike. She got me to the hospital in time. And because of her choice, because she saw me as a human being when no one else would, I got to hold my wife's hand. I got to tell her I loved her. I got to be there when she woke up. His voice wavered slightly, but he didn't stop. That mechanic Lena Brooks was fired on the spot for helping me. In front of customers, in front of her co-workers, her manager told her she was nothing. He said she was a quota hire. He said she didn't belong. He used words I won't repeat here. He humiliated her, and then he threw her out. For doing the right thing. Ethan's jaw tightened. In the days since I've learned that Lena wasn't an isolated case. I've learned that this shop and many like it, has a documented history of discrimination. 47 complaints filed over 3 years. 47. Racial discrimination, gender-based harassment, sexual harassment, hostile work environment, retaliation against anyone who dared to speak up. He held up a folder, thick with papers. This contains all of them. Every complaint, every ignored plea for help, every person who tried to speak up and was silenced, every time the system failed to protect the people it was supposed to serve. The camera zoomed in on the folder, then back to Ethan. The manager responsible, Howard Mills, was removed from his position 3 weeks ago. The company conducted an independent audit. They found systemic failures. They implemented new management and new policies. They tried to do the right thing. He paused, his expression hardening. And since then Howard Mills has been conducting a campaign of harassment, lies and sabotage. Fake reviews posted from anonymous accounts, false complaints filed by people who've never even been to the shop, planted news stories designed to make the new management look incompetent, all of it designed to destroy the lives and livelihoods of the people who dared to hold him accountable. Ethan set the folder down on a table beside him and pulled out his phone. "I want to show you something." The video cut to a series of screenshots. Anonymous review accounts, all created on the same day, IP addresses traced to the same location, payment records showing money transferred to a reputation management company specializing in negative SEO. "This," Ethan said, his voice cold, "is what revenge looks like when someone can't accept that their behavior has consequences. This is what happens when a bully loses his power and decides to burn everything down rather than admit he was wrong." The video cut back to Ethan standing in front of the shop. Howard Mills isn't a victim. He's not a working-class hero standing up to corporate tyranny. He's a man who spent 15 years creating a hostile work environment, who buried complaints, who retaliated against anyone who challenged him, who made people's lives miserable because he could. Ethan's voice rose slightly, passion breaking through the measured tone, and when he was finally held accountable, he decided to destroy everything. Not just the shop, not just the new management, but the people. The mechanics trying to make a living, the customers who depend on reliable service, and most of all Lena Brooks, the woman whose only crime was helping a stranger. He paused, letting the words sink in. "I'm releasing all of this publicly. The audit reports, the complaint records, the evidence of Mills' smear campaign, every fake account, every planted story, every lie. It's all going online, right now. Anyone can see it. Anyone can verify it." The screen showed a URL, www.truthaboutnorthline.com. "I'm not asking you to take my word for it," Ethan continued. "I'm asking you to look at the evidence, to decide for yourselves, to see what really happened here." His expression softened slightly. "And to Lena Brooks, wherever you are, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that doing the right thing cost you so much. I'm sorry that the system failed you so completely. I'm sorry that you're now being attacked for having the courage to help a stranger. But I want you to know something." He looked directly into the camera. "You mattered. What you did mattered. You saved my wife's life. You reminded me what humanity looks like. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows it. Not because I want gratitude, not because I want credit, but because the truth matters. And you deserve to have your story told." The video ended. Within an hour it had been viewed 500,000 times. Within 3 hours 2 million. Within 6 hours 5 million. By the end of the day it was trending nationwide. News outlets picked it up. Billionaire exposes discrimination at Chicago auto shop. Viral video reveals systemic racism in service industry. Woman who lost job for act of kindness becomes symbol of workplace injustice. The comments flooded in by the tens of thousands. "This is exactly what's wrong with corporate America. They protect the bullies and punish the heroes. Lena Brooks is a real one. We need more people like her in this world. Howard Mills needs to be in jail. This is criminal harassment. I work in auto repair and this happens all the time. Mills isn't an outlier. He's the norm. Anyone know how we can support Lena? She deserves better than this." Within hours, someone had started a GoFundMe for Lena. By the end of the day it had raised over $50,000. The story exploded across every platform. Traditional media, social media, industry publications. Everyone wanted a piece of it, and across town in his dingy apartment, Howard Mills sat frozen in front of his television, watching his world collapse in real time. His phone rang. It was his lawyer. "Don't say anything. Don't post anything. Don't leave your apartment. Do you understand me? This is insane. He can't just." He already did. And Howard listened to me very carefully. "The police are building a case. They've got evidence of the fake accounts. They've traced payments. They're looking at charges, harassment, defamation, cyber-stalking, conspiracy, maybe even witness tampering if they can prove you threatened anyone." Mills' hand trembled. "He's lying. I didn't." "It doesn't matter what you did or didn't do anymore," the lawyer interrupted. "What matters is what they can prove. And right now there's enough evidence to bury you. Your face is all over the internet. Your name is toxic. No one's going to hire you. No one's going to defend you. And if you're not very, very careful, you're going to end up in a courtroom. Then what the hell am I supposed to do? Keep your head down, stay off social media, don't talk to reporters, don't contact anyone from that shop, and pray that public opinion dies down before the prosecutor decides to make an example of you." The lawyer hung up. Mills sat in the dark, staring at the screen, his hands shaking with impotent rage and growing fear. He had thought he could outlast them, thought he could bury them in lies and half-truths until they gave up. He had been catastrophically wrong. 3 days later, Howard Mills was arrested outside his apartment building at 6 in the morning. The charges: criminal harassment, conspiracy to commit defamation, cyber-stalking, and witness intimidation. Photographers were waiting. Someone had tipped them off. His face, red, twisted with fury and fear, was plastered across every news site by noon. Former manager arrested in viral discrimination case. Howard Mills charged with harassment. Campaign against mechanic who helped stranger. From shop manager to criminal defendant, the fall of Howard Mills. The narrative had been set, and for the first time in her life, Lena Brooks's name was spoken not with contempt or pity but with respect. She was no longer the quota hire. She was the woman who had stood up, and in a world that often felt like it rewarded cruelty and punished kindness, people were hungry for a different story. They were hungry for a hero, even if she didn't feel like one. 4 months later, Lena stood in front of a small storefront on the west side of Chicago, her hands in her pockets, her breath misting in the cold morning air. Above the door a sign hung in fresh paint: Brooks Automotive, Integrity First. It was small, just 3 bays, room for maybe 8 mechanics if they squeezed, but it was hers. The GoFundMe had raised over $200,000. Ethan had matched it, dollar for dollar. And with that money she still couldn't quite believe was real. She had leased this space, bought equipment, hired her first mechanics. One was a woman named Jasmine, 23 years old, who'd been turned away from every shop in the city because she was too young and too pretty to be taken seriously. Another was Carlos, a 52-year-old immigrant from Guatemala who'd been told his accent made customers uncomfortable. The third was Marcus, not Ethan's Marcus, but a different one. A black man in his 40s who'd been pushed out of 3 shops for not fitting the culture. Lena had hired all of them without hesitation, because she knew what it felt like to be counted out before you even got started. The door opened behind her and Patricia Chen stepped out, holding 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Lena. "Big day," Patricia said. "Yeah, nervous, terrified." Patricia smiled. "Good, that means you care." They stood in silence for a moment, sipping their coffee, watching the city wake up around them. North Line Transit and Auto had survived. Barely, but it had survived. Patricia had stayed on as manager and slowly, painfully, the reputation had begun to recover. The fake reviews had been removed. The smear campaign had been exposed. New customers were coming in. It wasn't perfect. It probably never would be. But it was better. "You know," Patricia said, "what you did, it changed more than just one shop. It changed how people think, about who deserves respect, about what it means to stand up, about what happens when you choose humanity over fear." Lena shook her head. "I didn't do anything special." "Yes, you did. You saw someone hurting and you helped. That's the most special thing in the world, especially when it costs you everything." Lena's throat tightened. "Ethan and Sarah are coming by later," Patricia continued. "They wanted to see the place, wanted to congratulate you in person. They don't need to do that. They want to. Sarah especially. She's been asking about you." Lena smiled despite herself. Later that afternoon, as the winter sun began its early descent, Ethan and Sarah arrived in a modest sedan. Not the black town car, not the executive vehicle, just a normal car that didn't draw attention. Sarah moved slowly, still recovering, leaning slightly on a cane. But her eyes were bright and warm, and when she saw Lena her face lit up. She crossed the floor carefully and took Lena's hands in hers. They were small hands, soft, so different from Lena's calloused palms. "I wanted to meet the woman who gave me more time with my husband," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. Lena's eyes filled with tears. "I'm just glad you're okay." "I'm more than okay. I'm here. I get to see my grandchildren grow up. I get to wake up next to the man I love. I get to keep living." Sarah squeezed her hands. "Because of you. I just fixed a bike." "No," Sarah said firmly. "You did so much more than that. You saw my husband when everyone else looked away. You chose compassion when it would have been easier to stay silent. You risked everything for a stranger. That's not just fixing a bike. That's being the kind of person the world desperately needs. Lena couldn't speak. She just stood there, tears streaming down her face, holding the hands of this woman she'd saved without even knowing it. Ethan stepped forward, his own eyes suspiciously bright. We're proud of you, not because you built this. He gestured around the small shop, but because you never stopped being who you are. Even when it would have been easier to become bitter. Even when you had every reason to give up. Lena looked at them. This couple who had somehow become part of her story, who had changed her life in ways she was still trying to understand. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything, for believing in me, for fighting for me, for making sure the truth came out. No, Ethan said, shaking his head. Thank you, for reminding us what matters, for showing us that one person can make a difference, for being brave when bravery cost you everything. They stayed for an hour, touring the small shop, meeting her mechanics, talking about plans for the future. Sarah insisted on having her picture taken with Lena, and Ethan promised to send customers her way. As they were leaving, Sarah turned back one more time. You know what the best part is, she said. What? You're not just surviving anymore. You're thriving. You're building something that will help other people like you, other people who need someone to believe in them. Sarah smiled. You've become exactly what you needed when you were starting out. And that's the greatest gift you can give. They left as the sun set, the sky turning orange and purple over the Chicago skyline. Lena stood in the doorway of her shop, watching the city move around her. The lights flickering on, the traffic flowing, the endless rhythm of life. She thought about everything that had happened. The humiliation, the fear, the uncertainty, the fight, the vindication. She thought about Mills, probably sitting in a jail cell or a courtroom, facing the consequences of his actions. She thought about the system that had tried to break her, and how it had broken so many others before her. And she realized something. The world hadn't changed. Not really. Prejudice still existed. Discrimination still happened. Systems still failed. People who needed them most. But she had changed. She was no longer invisible. She had been seen, not because someone powerful had chosen to see her, but because she had refused to disappear, because she had stood up when it would have been easier to stay down, because she had chosen humanity over self-preservation. And that mattered. Maybe it didn't change the world. Maybe it only changed one shop, one story, one life at a time. But it mattered. As she stood there, her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. My name is Keisha. I saw your story. I'm a mechanic trying to get hired, and everyone keeps turning me down. Do you have any advice? Lena looked at the message for a long moment. Then she typed back, come by tomorrow at 9 a.m. Bring your resume. Let's talk. She put her phone away and smiled, because the world might not change all at once, but it changed one person at a time, one act of kindness at a time, one moment of courage at a time. And that, Lena realized, was exactly enough. She walked back into her shop, turning off the lights one by one, and locked the door behind her. Tomorrow she would open it again, and the day after that, and the day after that, for as long as it took, for as long as there were people who needed someone to believe in them. Because that's what you did when you knew what it felt like to be invisible. You made sure no one else had to feel that way, and you kept going, no matter what.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.